So thank you all so much for joining us for tonight's program. I'm very excited. Let's see, we have best-selling author, Hugo, Nebula, and Locus Award winner, Mary Robinette Kowal. We'll discuss her brand new science fiction novel, The Martian Contingency, a Lady Astronaut Novel. So Mary Robinette is the author of the award-winning alternate history novel, The Calculating Stars, which is the first book in the Lady Astronaut series. She is also the author of the Glamourist Histories series and the Ghost Talkers, and has received the Astounding Award for Best New Writer, 4 Hugo Awards, the Nebula and Locus Awards. Her stories appear in Asimov's Uncanny and several years' best anthologies. She has also worked as a professional puppeteer, is a member of the award-winning podcast Writing Excuses, and performs as a voice actor, recording fiction for authors, including Seanan McGuire, Cory Doctorow, and Neal Stephenson. So you can see I probably mispronounced about 7 different sci-fi related terms there. I apologize. All right, so for all of us who are watching live and the many more that will watch the recording, let's give a big virtual round of applause to Mary Robinette for joining us here this evening. Mary Robinette, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
All
So
right.
really appreciate it.
I can't wait to dive in. Before we get to your new book, your 4th book in your Lady Astronaut series, and there's actually some other short stories and novellas and things in there as well. Can we take a step back and talk about the Mary Robinette origin story? How did you first get interested in writing?
Well, I was one of those kids who wanted to do everything, and my parents were pretty supportive of that. My mom was an arts administrator, and so she very much had the philosophy that if you wanted to explore some form of art, you should. That meant that I wrote in high school. I took a summer writing camp as a high schooler. And then I went off to college, art education, minor in theater and speech, and then became a professional puppeteer because that seemed like a logical thing to do, and kind of put writing to the side for about a decade until I had a severe puppet injury, which took me out of performance for a while. And that was the point where I realized that I'd been getting my creative jollies from performance and from thinking about the world building of a show, the character creation of a show, and started writing again, realized how much I enjoyed it. And because mom was an arts administrator, my natural instinct was, well, how do you make money at this? I figured if I could make money as a puppeteer, that surely as a writer, someone was paying money for that. I knew I was buying books.
You know, in addition to being a great puppeteer, you're also an amazing narrator, I must say. I actually listened to your book, which you narrate yourself.
I do.
Fantastic. Honestly, one of the best narrators I think I've ever listened to.
Oh,
Not
thank you so
exaggerating.
much.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we delve into your most recent book, can we just take a step back? I imagine a lot of the people on the call and those that will watch the recording are familiar with you and your work and your series, but could you talk a bit about the Lady Astronaut series?
Absolutely. So, Calculating Stars is an alternate history. I began in 1952 by slamming an asteroid into Washington, D.C., which was not wish fulfillment when I wrote it. But anyway, I kicked off the space program fast and early and with 100% more women and people of color. And the thing that I was interested in was what would have happened if we had continued to put money into the space program at the same rates that we were the Apollo program. I was interested in what would happen if people were cooperating, if they were trying to work together to do this, if it was an international effort, which is why the genesis of that was a meteor instead of some other force. I love the TV show For All Mankind so much. It's so good. But one of the things that frustrates me is that it's the same story. It's a space race and it's about saber rattling. And my story is about what happens when we all come together, when we try to create something new in
Excellent.
space.
Yeah, got it. Got it. So many different directions we can go in. I first, before we delve into the characters and the plot of your latest book, can we talk about the research that you've done for this book, and then for the maybe for the series overall? But for this book, before we get there, actually, it might make sense for the audience. Can you give us, a brief 60-second synopsis of your latest book here? What should we know about the Martian Contingency?
The Martian Contingency takes place about 20 years after Calculating Stars. In Calculating Stars, we're dealing with this huge disaster and a push to get off the planet. In Martian Contingency, we are on the second Mars expedition. My main character, Dr. Elma York, she's a pilot, she's a mathematician, she's also a Southern Jew with anxiety. And she is now the second in command on this mission. When they arrive, even though she was on the first expedition, she had to stay in orbit for plot reasons. So this is her first time being on the surface of Mars. And the moment she arrives, it is obvious that something happened on the first expedition, and none of the people who were on it will talk to her about it. So it's a lot of that. But for me, it's also, how do you make this new community on this new planet? Which pieces of Earth do you take with you? How many times are we going to celebrate New Year's?
Yeah, I and I had to get used to some of the terminology that I was
Souls versus
unfamiliar with.
days.
Exactly, that there's an extra like 40 minutes on Mars. Who knew? Every
Yeah,
day. So let's talk about the research, though. What sort of research did you do? Obviously, we don't live on Mars yet. So can you walk us through? And you write, I guess, what's considered hard science fiction.
right.
So, like, almost like fact-based science fiction, if you will. So,
Mhm.
how did you research what living on Mars would be like?
Fortunately, there's a lot of research about this. I've been very lucky as I've been working on the series to become friends with a lot of people in the space program, astronauts, Martian geologists, uh, all kinds of really, really amazing people, lots of rocket engineers. So we don't know what it's like to live on Mars because no one has actually lived there, but there is a lot of Martian simulations that have happened. So one of my consultants is Dr. Shana Gifford, who was on a year-long Mars simulation and is also was also a NASA flight surgeon, which means that she was responsible for the health of actual astronauts in space, and is obviously a medical doctor. So I had people like that who were able to talk to me about what their experience was like. One of the things I remember her talking about was that with the time delay, because they created a time delay for them, with the time delay that you might be having a disagreement with someone back on Earth, and you would queue up all of the arguments during the 40 minutes it took for them to be able to reply to you. And then they replied and they're like, oh, yeah, you're right. I'm so sorry. Let's fix that. And you're like, but I have all this anger built up. And that was a thing that had never occurred to me, that this would be a way that you would interact with that time lag. So things like that. There's also for all of the Mars rovers, the helicopter Ingenuity, Perseverance, all of those, the operators and everybody at Jet Propulsion Laboratory who's working on those, anyone who is interacting with any of the drivers, they live on Mars time while they're on duty. And the reason is that they need to be operating Perseverance or any of the rovers during Martian daylight hours, which means that they need to be awake during that. And because of that 39-minute difference, they go out of sync very quickly. And that's one of the reasons Jet Propulsion Laboratory in particular has this difference between a day, which is an Earth normal 24 hours, and a Sol, which is a Martian 24.39. Because you have to be able to differentiate. Are we going to do this today? Are we going to do this to Sol? Is this happening tomorrow or next Sol? Because if it's tomorrow here, but isn't next, like if tomorrow here is in the middle of the night on Mars, it's important to know which one you're talking about.
Right.
And it is wildly confusing and one of the hardest things probably to get in there. I was I was unnecessarily stubborn about using it.
Something else that must have been difficult for you, um, not just because of the science and technology, but also because of the, all the storylines related to religion and culture and gender and everything, was the fact that this was all set in the 1970s, right? Mm-hmm. So you're talking about science fiction, but you're not talking about today's technology or technology in the future. You're talking about technology based in the 1970s. Can you talk about a bit about the difficulty of having the book set in the year 1970?
One of the things that is interesting when you start looking at the space program is that we have there are a lot of things like the space shuttle was in concept at that time. We were still doing moon stuff at that point, which is it's easy to forget. So what I did, since mine has people going into space in the 50s, is that I let myself have an accelerated space timeline. Right. So when I was looking at 1970, I'm like, okay, well, what kind of things were we doing 20 years? What kind of things were happening in the space program in the 80s and 90s? So that was technology that I was allowed to use in the space program. But because of, again, the way the space program plays out there, when you send computers into space in the 1950s, computers were all still women. You didn't have miniaturized computers. And the reason we have them now is because of the pressure to shrink them for space programs. But in my universe, they solved that problem by sending women up there to do the calculations. So they didn't have that same pressure. So I was keeping my computers about 10 to 20 years behind where that technology, behind the 1970s. It was just playing with that timeline in that way. And then the other piece that I had was that I had to use their technology, but with an awareness of Mars that is more robust than our awareness because they've actually had boots on the ground. So I had to be really on top of all of the Martian, all of the current Martian science, and that was a lot of fun. I wound up because of ingenuity and perseverance, they included microphones. We had sound from Mars for the first time, and so that meant I would write something and then I would see a piece of research come out and I would frantically go and try to tweak things to make sure that I was not wrong, or to incorporate something cool. Like the speed of sound on Mars changes mid-frequency, like mid high low. So basically what that means is if you have a choir on Mars, and assuming that a choir could sing on Mars in Martian atmosphere, or if you were playing music of a choir and that we could hear it with our naked ear without dying, the sound, I think it's the sound of the sopranos would arrive before the sound of the bass. I may have it backwards, but basically the sounds arrive at different times, which is so cool and not the way it works here on Earth.
So what should we know about Elma York, your female protagonist? We know so far that she's the second in command. Mm-hmm. She has social anxiety, suffering from like an imposter syndrome. I do know she has a very healthy sex life with her husband. Yep. What else do I need to know about Elma?
So I do try to write all of my books as standalones, even though Martian Contingency is book 4. I have given it to people. I've seen people read it as its first, as if it were the first novel. So those are the things that I would say are the, when you step into the book, I think the fact that she's Jewish, the fact that she's Southern, those affect the way she moves through the world, the choices that she makes, the pressures that are being put on her. But in terms of the, if you were going to grab this book, what backstory do you need? Hopefully it's all already there.
No, and you know what? I can speak from firsthand experience, having not read the first three books in the series and picked up this one sort of as a standalone. Yes, you really you delve right into it,
Oh, good.
and the
Phew.
characters are yeah the characters are pretty well developed pretty quickly for the most part. Let's see here. So many questions to ask. So this is sort of a big picture question.
Mhm.
What did you want readers to take away about the role of women in science and in technology, past and present?
Women have always been in science and technology and are either overlooked, actively erased, or men take credit for it. Um, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, in just to take one, in the 1940s, had a policy that they did not hire men for the computing department because they felt like their work ethic suffered. Um, when you go farther back, when you start looking at astronomy, women are there. They're doing the work. They're making the discoveries, and media tends to focus on the guys. So most of the women in these books are based on real women. Most of the hurdles and challenges that they face are based on things that have happened to real women, sometimes in the 1950s, sometimes in the 21st century. So I think that's the big takeaway is that we've always been there.
So in the Martian Contingency, Elma's team, they're building a society on Mars.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to preserve Earth's cultures. You mentioned, their religions and celebrating their New Year's. And they're trying to do all this, though, without taking the bad things,
Right.
like the prejudices. In
Mm-hmm.
your book, really confronts a lot of things regarding race and gender and uh, gender identity, and I'm sure I miss it, religion, culture, all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
So, how does one sort of take the good of Earth's cultures and leave behind all the negative things? That's sort of that's one of the underlying, I think, stories of the book.
Yeah, it's a good question. And in a lot of ways, this is a thought experiment. Because the book is like we only get about 6 months into the mission, I think. I can't remember. That sounds maybe a
It's
year.
yeah.
We don't get that deep into the mission. It's hard to say whether or not it actually works, right? But I think that I've been involved in something called the Space Economy Camp for Writers. And its mission was to use science fiction writers, pairing them with um, economists to look at how to make a sustainable, non exploitive uh, society in space. One of the things that comes up in multiple different models is the idea of open, honest communication and also setting boundaries in terms of the tone. This is what we do as a society. This is what being a good society means. These are the positives, as opposed to societies that are, if you do this, you get punished. That those tend to not be sustainable. But societies where everyone is pulling together, those do actually tend to be sustainable. In isolation, when you have a bully come in, you do have to have other ways of dealing with that. So what I was looking at was them all having that open, honest communication, and what happens when you don't have that open, honest communication. So the things of, can we celebrate? You celebrating this holiday takes nothing away from me celebrating my holiday. So those are the kinds of things, just making space, holding each other up, celebrating. Those seem to be things that work.
Now, one question that I always like to ask authors and this is going to cue you up for something else as well, is there anything in the book, and maybe in the original drafts, that didn't make the final cut that you can share with us without spoiling things?
In fact, thank you. Yes, I have. I have a cut scene. So one of the things about writing this book is that there were a lot of complications with the calendar, and this is a scene that I had to cut because of needing to make revisions because I had decided to base this whole thing on the calendar, which I was a choice that I made. And let me read this little cutting for you, and then I can talk about part of the reason it's not in the book anymore. To let you know, this will be full of things that sound like spoilers. They are not spoilers because they are not in the book. The thing you should know is that Mission Control on Earth has sent an order that they don't like, and they've been trying to figure out a way to deal with it. The way all of these events play out is different in the actual book, but I loved this scene, and so I'm going to share it with you. It still, I think, gets to the it still captures the flavor and the tone. Okay, so we did come up with a better plan than my surname idea, although it incorporated some name obfuscation. It was somewhat more nuanced and less likely to get us caught. It was simple in that we would follow Parker's orders to bring his selection of men down from the Goddard, but we were not taking the women up. It would mean setting up hammocks in the main dome to accommodate having 10 extra people, but there was enough space to do that. The first step to our plan was to make it look like the women were retreating to the Goddard, so I sat in the pilot's seat of the Esther with Helen beside me. We looked back over the seats that were filled with all of the women who were down on the mission. All of them except Dawn, who stood at the back with Howard Tang and a camera with a tripod. She was muttering to herself as she adjusted the focus. Then she stepped back, gesturing to the camera. "It's ready? Don't touch anything." Howard held his hands out and to the side. "No touching, which is going to make it hard to actually take the photo." She rolled her eyes and made her way back to her seat. "You know what I mean. Take 12. All of us had our spacesuits on with the helmets open. I pulled out the lipstick and curled my eyelashes for this. It reminded me of the old days when I was photographed powdering my nose in a T-33 as a publicity photo about Lady Astronauts. And here we were doing it again. This time, though, it was a subtle message to Earth. The only astronauts in this photo would be women. Parker could use it as a happy photo of us retreating to the Goddard if he wanted, but that wasn't what it was. "Ready?" Howard put his hand over the trigger. Each of us had picked an icon of the job that we did for the IAC. I sat in the pilot's seat. Helen had a slide rule. Florence had a portable radio set. Cam had a syringe. Catalina and Ahana held planters. Dawn had another camera. Zainabu held a glove and a needle. Opal had a wrench. Name had an item. I didn't finish it. All of us sat in a carefully posed arrangement composed by Dawn. "Do it!" Dawn glared into the camera. There were no smiles here. We were professionals and we had a job to do. None of us were just pretty faces, and none of us needed to smile. I told Parker that I would not fight him in public, but that was not the same thing as rolling over and going belly up. "Do you want one where you're smiling?" Howard looked up from the camera. "No." I spoke quickly because I know how the public affairs office worked. "If we do a smiling one, that's the one that they'll use." "She's completely right." Dawn looked around the cabin as if she were checking the composition one last time. She stood up and went back to the tripod. "How many did you take?" 12, just like you told me to." Howard stepped back from the camera. She leaned down, looking through the viewfinder. "Good." Straightening, she grabbed the camera and began removing it from the tripod. "All right, everyone, that's a wrap." I grinned at them. "Now y'all get off my ship." a thought occurred to me. Actually, before I forget, someone had sex out here. I could figure out who, but I'm just going to ask you to tell your husbands that this ship is off limits. Catalina raised her hand. Sorry, that was me and Bully. We just wanted to be a little loud, you know? I blinked, honestly startled that someone had admitted to it. Oh, okay. I cleared my throat. Thank you? Would the cargo area be all right? She snapped the planter she was holding into a carry bag. I bit the inside of my lip and tried to channel Nicole, who would be absolutely unflustered by conversations like this. Let's discuss that when we get the pressurized gantry built. Until then, I'd like to preserve the consumables. I recommend exploring other types of consumables. Zainabu snapped her gloves back into place. Howard, bless his heart, turned even brighter red than me. He cleared his throat. I'm just gonna wait in the airlock. So, the reason I had to cut this is a lot of it was to do with the calendar. I had to make a number of changes. I had one of my rocket engineers, I'd sent the manuscript to him just to look at some of the rocketry stuff. And I get an email back from the rocketry stuff, and he's like, so how detailed do you want me to be? And I'm like, I don't like that question. Be detailed. And he said, well, your landing date doesn't work because of orbital mechanics. And I was like, how far off is it? And he said, about a year. And the whole thing is built on calendar, right? So that means that in 1969, when I had originally planned on having this, the anniversary of the meteor, which is March 3rd, and Easter and Purim all happened within the same week. In 1970, they are spread by several weeks. And so I had to move everything. And then when you move everything, it also means that the relationship between the Earth and Mars are now different. So that means that all of my time lags are all different. So every scene I had to, where they talk to Earth, I had to go in and adjust the timing. And one of them went from being an 8-minute lag, which is the shortest you can have, to 40 minutes, which is the longest. And it was like completely different scenes. So that involved having to move around some other plot elements. There were a bunch of reasons that this scene needed to get pulled out. I was pulling my hair out, and my friend said, do you want me to help with coming up with exactly when these things are? And I'm like, yes, because I had a calendar that a friend had helped me put together that was tracking a bunch of different things. But the thing is that I have to track not just the difference between Earth and Mars, but Elma is also Jewish. So I'm having to track the Jewish calendar, which is a lunar calendar, and then the Chinese lunar calendar, and it's an international thing. So there's also a Hindi calendar and an Islamic calendar. And it was just, and also Elma's period. So it was a lot. So my friend gets in there, the rocket engineer, and he's like, I will just make a spreadsheet for you. And I give him my research about what I had been, what I had been using for the Martian calendar. And I get an email back, and he's like, so how detailed do you want me to be? And I'm like, no, don't ask me these questions. And the problem was that the person who had helped me with the first calendar had accidentally made a mistake, which is that the Martian calendar that we were using, there's a bunch of them, but the one that I thought was most likely to have been used in the 1970s was one designed by I.M. Levitt. And it had months that were 55 to 56 days long. And the person who had put my calendar together accidentally did 54 and 55. So I had to redo all of the dates. I'm like, no. And so I finally get it, redo everything, have fixed all of the problems, have cut scenes, shuffled stuff around, turned it in. It has gone through copy editing and proofreading, and it is typeset. And the final person is going through it. The last person who goes through it before it goes to press. This is a person I've never interacted with before. They're called a blind reader, and they read the page proofs without looking at the original manuscript. And I get this email. It's like, how detailed do you want me to be? And I'm like, oh, for crying out loud. And it turns out that the friend who had helped me with this second calendar, which is amazing, it's like this massive spreadsheet and it tracks everything. It even tells me what time of day it is. It like in different time zones. It's fantastic. Had made one mistake. And that mistake was that he was Jewish and did not realize that there are two possible Easters. There's the Protestant Catholic Easter, and then there's the Eastern Orthodox Easter. And he had picked that one. So I had this scene that was taking place on Easter. When you read the book, you'll hit a scene where they say, golly, it's really too bad that mission parameters had us so busy on Easter that we couldn't do any celebrating. What do you say we do it on Orthodox Easter instead? And that's why that scene is in the book.
Mary Robinette, we have to. We're gonna. I mean, your reading and then your explanation was just amazing. I think we're gonna have to make that into its own little video. So, folks, I am going to continue to ask about 10 more minutes of questions, and then we'll get to audience questions and comments. And so you just gave us a bit of your narration. Did your background as a voice actor and puppeteer, you had mentioned that, did those two things influence how your writing, maybe how you developed the characters or the dialogue?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a number of different things. And there's a pretty direct train. I think of puppetry. Puppetry is a form of acting. You're using all kinds of voice, but you're specifically manipulating an inanimate object, and you're trying to give it facial expressions that it doesn't have. It's a rigid face most of the time. Some of them are flexible. So that means you're relying on body language a lot. And there are tools that I use to create a character that is a puppet that translate directly onto the page. This is everything from something called focus. The idea with focus is that what you're looking at is what you're thinking about. So here we are. Welcome. So what you're doing is everything you look at, that's the thing that you're thinking about. Like, now I'm thinking about you. I'm thinking about my hand. And then there's breath. So breath indicates emotion. And then we have something called meaningful movement. There's also muscle, but I think of that as internal motivation, that I want it to look like the life is coming out of the character itself. But then meaningful movement is the idea that when the character moves, it needs to mean something. So instead of, like, I came from over there, I was going over there, there's something called head bobbing. We don't like it, but we match one movement per phrase. I came from over there, I'm going over there. Nice talking to you. And so you just pick one movement at a time. So all of those things work on the page in exactly the same way. You look at how the character is moving, whether or not they need to express an emotion, what movement you can tie to that emotion. And then we're relying on the audience to fill in the gaps. Like, everyone knows that expression that Miss Piggy makes when she's flirting with Kermit the Frog, where she bats her eyelashes at him, except that she doesn't actually have moving eyes. So she can't bat her eyes at him. That's something that you, the audience, does. And so as a puppeteer, as a writer, I know that my audience is building half of the show for me. And so it's about giving them the tools, making sure that my character is focused on something that I want them to be thinking about, and I want the reader to be thinking about. And then when I go into voice acting, I talk about voice acting as being puppetry without the pain, because I have to do all the same character manipulation with my voice, but I'm not having to tie myself in knots or hold 125-pound puppets while I'm doing it. And then voice acting is taking the written word and turning it back into spoken word. And the written word is designed originally to record the spoken word. So that means that I can take all of my voice acting tricks and reverse engineer them to figure out how to create compelling character voices on the page. So one of the things for me is I know that my things are going to be read out loud. So I think about unintentional repetition. I think about homophones because they are they can, like, there's nothing you can do about them when they happen on the page. Like I was narrating somebody else's book, and they had this line about a stand of trees, a copse, COPSE, and the sentence was, "She ran from the police into the cops," and I'm like, I can't. There's nothing. I can't fix that. I can't do anything about that. On the page, it's fine. So I think about that. I think about what things are not going to be okay spoken that are fine on the page. Mm-hmm. And then I also think about what things are fine spoken that are ambiguous on the page, and that I need to do something to remove that ambiguity. So definitely it has an effect. And then specifically, actually, with these books, a lot of the pain and body trauma that astronauts suffer is very closely aligned to the things that happen to puppeteers. I've watched them like working their hands like this when they come out of a spacesuit, and that is exactly the same movement that I do when I've been using a puppet that's too stiff. I see them icing their shoulders. I see the stretches that they do. Those are the same stretches that I have to do when I'm performing. So that gave me a really very specific insight into what their bodies feel like when they're doing these things.
We're going to have to clip that answer too, I think. That was great. So Mary Robinette, this is sort of current events. You probably weren't expecting me to ask you a question about this. But do you just have any thoughts on the recent Blue Origin flight that featured, I think, an all-female crew, including lots of celebrities? But any thoughts there?
Yeah, I do. I think it's great that these women got to go into space. I have a pretty complicated feeling about this, because I have friends who are professional astronauts. But I think saying that these women are amateur astronauts is not disrespectful, but it does draw a distinction between them. In the same way that in astronomy, a lot of the really big discoveries are made by amateur astronomers, and it literally means people who are doing it for the love. So, but I do think that there's a distinction between those two groups. Professional astronauts, there's an element of service and science that I think is, and training that I think is important to acknowledge. The amateur astronauts, I think there's a love and enthusiasm. And we see this pattern throughout history. Anytime there's a piece of new technology introduced, it is initially the plaything of the wealthy. Airplanes, cars, these are all originally playthings of the wealthy. Amelia Earhart, who's this icon for being the first woman to make a transatlantic crossing on an airplane, did not fly the plane. She did later, but her initial celebrity was just because she was a passenger. And that made it seem accessible to people. And I hate that. I hate that that is the way our society is built. I hate that we have not had a rocket go up with only women on it since Valentina Tereshkova, who was the first woman in space, Russian cosmonaut. And that the only way we get to have that is by women spending money to go to space on something that will be treated like a stunt. Women, an all-women's rocket launch from NASA will never happen. And it will never happen because NASA partners with the Soviet Union, and we have an agreement that a cosmonaut goes up. And the cosmonauts are all men. There's one woman, she's not going to fly because of politics. We have an agreement with Canada. We have agreements with Japan. We have an agreement with the EU, the ESA. All of those, and there's still more male astronauts in the United States than there are women. So all of those factors mean that the only way we get an all-woman spaceflight is billionaires and spending money to go on something that the public is going to treat like a joyride, like a bachelorette party, that they're going to diminish in every single way possible. And there is no other route to get them there.
Just a couple more questions from me, and then we'll get to the good stuff. So in preparation, well, first of all, I kind of buried the lead. I should have mentioned this in the introduction, but this book is a USA instant bestseller. So congratulations there.
Thank you so much.
And I read all 139 reviews on Goodreads in preparation for this interview. And what I will say, something that came up over and over and over again, I hope this isn't the last book in this series. Is this really the last book in this series? So Mary Robinette, I'm not sure if you can divulge this or not. I think originally this is supposed to be the last book, maybe kind of. But what is there going to be a book 5? What's next? What's next?
That's a great question. And I don't know the answer to that. I do know that I wrote it to be the last Elma novel.
Okay.
Because the Elma story begins actually with a novelette called The Lady Astronaut of Mars. And a lot of this for me was, how did she become the Lady Astronaut of Mars? And I think this shows that, but it also shows her passing the torch. So what I'd like to do is other stories with the next generation of astronauts. And I tried to set those up. Whether or not I do another one, we do live in a capitalist society, so it will depend on how many copies we sell.
There you go. Honest answer. No, we appreciate that. And then
something else planned, but that's not the same thing as do we get to have them.
Understood. And then something else I did was I watched your recent, what I think was a recent AMA that you had on your YouTube channel. And I know you hate this question. You hate the question I'm about to ask, but I have to ask it anyway. What are you working on now, Mary Robinette? What is next for you? Something to do with dragons, I hear?
There's something to do with dragons that I'm writing, but my next thing out in the world is actually coming out in October. It is, and I'm really excited about it. It's another science fiction novel or a novella. It's called Apprehension. And I don't know if you remember the old Ace doubles where you had one book on one side and you flipped it over and it was another book on the other.
Sure.
So Saga is reviving that format. Sam J. Miller and I have a Saga double. On the other side of this book, he has one called Red Star Hustle. We've both written science fiction noirs. Mine feels like Alfred Hitchcock in space. And Sam's has much more of a Raymond Chandler kind of vibe, but very definitely in space, like in far future. So that comes out in October. That's the thing that I'm sort of switching my brain over into, the copy edits should be coming back in the next couple of days or next week or so. So that's what my brain is currently in that mode.
All right. Excellent. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for letting us know. All right. So we have
I am watching the yes. Webinar chat and those are so hard to catalog. I'm so sorry.
As a cataloger, that's actually my day job. That's my main responsibility. I can, thankfully I have a wonderful volunteer. No, excuse me, she's going to kill me. A wonderful assistant who does an amazing job. But yes, those books that can which side is up and which is front, which is back. All right, so we will get to audience questions and comments now. Lee says, Mary, I've read the entire series and I loved each book. The sexual banter between the characters was a bit unusual for sci-fi. Why did you make that choice to include the banter? By the way, we never really talked about Nathaniel, so if you want to talk about Nathaniel as well.
Sure.
But the sexual banter, how about that?
So I wanted to model a healthy married relationship, and I think that involves, sexy fun times, and everybody has different relationships. So that was one thing, was that this is their relationship, and the other thing is a bit unusual to see in science fiction. My dear, you are not reading the right books.
There we go, Lee. All right, so then we're going to jump to the Q&A box. Lisa says, "You're so smart and creative. I miss your puppet shows with your book readings at Powell's Books. Are any of your books being turned into TV series or movies?"
Well, first of all, thank you. I miss Powell's as well. I miss being able to do puppet shows. I thought about doing one for this, and I had I had some family health things in the months leading up to this that made me not have the brain power to be like, I'm going to make a new tiny puppet show. But I'm glad you have memories of them and love it. As for TV movies, I'm going to give you the same answer that every science fiction writer or any writer will give you, which is that if I had one in development, I would have an NDA and I wouldn't be able to tell you about it. So that you will know about it at the moment that that we can talk about it. I can say that I have had things optioned in the past. I can say that I think at this point, most of my novels, but not all of my novels, have been optioned at one point or another. What I can't tell you is if I have anything optioned now, because
Yep.
But if I did not have anything optioned now, I would be able to tell you that.
Okay, I think I understand. We hosted Christopher Golden last Wednesday. I asked him a similar question. He said, stay tuned for that. And then the very next day, they announced that one of his books was optioned by Michael B. Jordan, the actor. I guess he owns some sort of
Oh yeah.
studio. So that was kind of interesting. Basically, he teased us, said, stay tuned for news soon. And then the very next day. But that's good for you. Good for
yeah,
you.
I mean, one of the other reasons that we don't talk about it is that Hollywood is basically in the business of not making movies.
Right.
So frequently someone will get something optioned and they'll get some sweet Hollywood money for it, and then they'll stop, they'll drop the option, they will never actually produce it.
Yeah.
So no one wants to get anyone's hopes up is the other thing.
Understood. So Rosemary asks, where did you train to read your own work? So how did you become a voice actor? What's the story behind that?
So I, in college, as part of the minor in theater and speech, I took radio theater. I did radio theater after college, and then a lot of the puppetry. I spent a lot of time, a lot of my career talking like a very small animal, but also having to do cross-gender voicing, because when you are touring with a puppet show, the bulk of puppeteers tour into elementary schools, and if you tour with a two-person cast, male female pairing, it gives you the widest possible voice range. But even with that, you're still going to wind up having to do cross-gender stuff. So I took all of that and then combined it with high school forensics, speech, debate, interpretive reading, where I literally competed in reading out loud. And then after that, it's just auditioning.
Yeah. Karen has a short question. She says, I love the fact that the Martian Contingency featured Purim. And I was reading it during my, I'm not good with Jewish cookies.
Hamantaschen.
Hamantaschen baking. What is your favorite flavor?
Poppy seed.
Yeah.
I also like
a lot of baking in the book. There was a lot of
that's why the poppy seed ones are in the book, because they're my favorites. But I like the apricot ones also.
There we go. Good. So Mary Robinette, we're going to start to wind things down. Okay. Where can folks learn more about you and your upcoming works? Website, social media, Patreon, where should people go?
All of the above. The easiest thing is to visit my website, maryrobinettekowal.com, and sign up for my newsletter. It comes out once a month. It'll tell you what I'm crafting, what my current crochet project is. If you are interested in all of the really, really soft, nubbly yarn that I'm working on, usually has something with my cat. what I'm reading, and then where to find me next. If you are a writer and you want to learn more about writing, I have a Patreon. You can get to it through the website, but it's also patreon.com/Mary Robinette. And I teach a class once a month. And I will not be mad because I know everybody has different income levels. If you sign up for it for a month, and or for the 7-day free trial, and you just do the 7-day free trial, and you mainline the 70 plus hours of archived material I have, I won't be mad about that. I mean, feel free to give me more money than that, but that's where I would send people, is
Sure.
newsletter on my website.
And normally I would end on that question, but your response actually got me thinking of another question, and we do have 3 minutes. I didn't even mention this in the intro. You are the former president of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America.
Mm-hmm.
And so, obviously this isn't a class, but could you give us a 60 seconds of advice? What would you give? What do you think an aspiring writer should know? Give us 60 seconds of advice.
60 seconds of advice. So I also do a podcast called Writing Excuses, and you should listen to that.
Yeah.
But the thing that I would say is trust your own taste. You have spent your entire life honing it as a reader, and you can trust yourself. Your taste is not unique, and trying to write for an editor's taste, when you've never met that editor, you don't know. You can read the magazine. You should read the magazines. It helps you know what's going on in the world. But all the magazine tells you is what that editor's taste was 1 or 2 years ago. It doesn't tell you anything about what they want right now. But your taste, that's what the editor is looking for. The editor is looking for something that only you can write. So trust your own taste, write the things that you love. Don't worry about markets.
So, folks, we'll end on that note. Let's give Mary Robinette a big virtual round of applause for a great discussion. For those watching live, look for an email for me later tonight with the recording, and please take 60 seconds and fill out the feedback survey when you exit the Zoom. Big shout out to Wellesley Books. Look for a link in the follow-up email to purchase a copy of the Martian Contingency. Easy for me to say. So, Mary Robinette, thank you so much. Really
Thank you,
appreciate
Robert.
you taking the time. Great job as always.
Thank you. It was an absolutely delightful time spending with you, and I look forward to having another conversation. Thank you all so much for your comments, and particularly the very funny ones that are over on the side about. Sorry about that double format there.
No worries. But thank you all so much, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. Bye-bye.
Bye.